This is We the Sales Engineers Podcast, show 47.
Welcome to We the SEs Podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramzi Marjaba. Ramzi does not fit in many airplane lavatories.
Hello, SE Nation. Welcome back. My name is Ramzi Marjaba, and I am creating a community for sales engineers by sales engineers so we can all stick together, help each other, learn from each other, and grow together. Quick tip of the day, the giveaway is underway. I started this podcast because I want to, first off, learn and also help as many people get better as SEs and even get jobs as SEs. Bottom line, I want to help as many people get their dream job, to either move from their current role and become SEs, or if they're already SEs and want to find a new role with a new company that's a better fit. And I'm doing all that through the podcast, but I also want to spend 1 hour with 5 people where we can work on the resume, prepare for interviews, or discuss career options, whatever it is that you need at that time. So check out the giveaway. More information about it is in the show notes. As for today's guest, his name is Art From. He will discuss his career as usual, but as a brief intro, he's an affiliate trainer for Great Demo by Peter Cohen. He also works with John Kerr, so he's very well connected. His focus of late has been on how to get sales engineers and account managers to work together as a team and not against each other. This was a big topic of discussion today. We discussed other things, but that was the main topic. And before we start, I really want to thank Art because he wanted to bring a great quality to you guys in terms of content and also sound. So he made me postpone the interview the first time around just so he can buy a microphone and you can hear him better. So I appreciate that. Show notes for today are at wethesalesengineers.com/show47. And without further ado, here's Art. Good morning, Art. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Ramzi. How are you?
I'm very well. You and I chatted before. I know who you are, but I'm fairly certain people listening might not be familiar with what you do. So can you introduce yourself to the folks listening?
So my name is Art From, and do you want me to say a little bit about my background or whatever?
Yes, I think your background is very important to what you do today.
So not to bore anybody, but I do, as Ramzi said, I think it is relevant in terms of how I got where I am and the type of things that I'm interested in doing. So I started out in mechanical engineering, and I quickly got interested in the software side of things. So all kinds of engineering applications such as CAD, CAM, and all that. And as you'll hear from my history, and if you look me up on LinkedIn, you'll see I've been around for a while. So this goes back to the days of, the transition from manual drafting over to computer automated drafting, and from 2D to 3D and all of that. So it really captured my imagination and interest in terms of the possibilities. And so I started to focus more on the engineering applications. And at the time I was at Lindy, and this was process plant design. So I ultimately was responsible for the applications within the design group as far as all the things that, 3D piping and civil engineering and all that stuff. And the importance of that is because that meant that I was a customer. So I was a consumer of technology for quite a while, for 10 years or so, and in various roles at a couple of other companies as well, hearing demos and being sold to, and people trying to take my money, and talking with SEs and all of that. As part of that role, because of the things that we were doing, one of the computer companies we were working with started to use us as a reference account, and they would bring some of their customers in, and I got the opportunity to show them what we were doing. So I started to gradually shift into a sales role, even though I was still an implementer of technology and a buyer of technology. But I was very interested in that as well. I got involved with user group meetings and things, and eventually was in some leadership positions. And that led to being recruited to come down to Huntsville, Alabama to Intergraph. So I was at Intergraph in a role of principal SE and eventually SE director, SE manager, etc., running a team. I then got an opportunity to move into a company called FormTech, continuing that role and expanding the role of SE manager by also doing what was called technical program coordination. We got involved from the very beginning of the sale all the way through and including overseeing the implementation portion of it. And then from there, I wound up at Parametric Technology, sales teams, and working with my team to develop them. So the middle part of my career was sales and sales management roles. And I was even an account manager for a little while at FormTech, which we might talk about later. That led me into what I've been doing now for quite a long time, which is sales enablement. So the team that I was leading at the time, we got a lot of feature function training and things like that. And, a lot about product does and everything, but we weren't really getting much training about what the customer's trying to buy or how to interface with the customer. We're given the opportunity to sit in on the account manager training. But typically, if anybody out there has been in account manager training, it's okay. I definitely advocate it that we can be involved because I think it's important to know what they're trained on, and there's always things we can glean out of it. But we really felt like we were wanting for more. So I decided with my team, when I was managing them at the time before I moved into enablement, that I needed to do something more than feature function training. And I asked the company if I could get some funding to, do a few things, creative things. And they said, sure, as long as we can see what happens. So let's give it a try. Well, needless to say, it was very successful. The team really liked it. The company liked it. And as a result, they said, okay, you're no longer running a sales team. You're now responsible for training all of the SEs worldwide, basically. So I moved into a sales enablement function where I was doing internal training. And we did a lot around things like beyond the features and advantages. What are the benefits of the solution? How do we find out what the customer cares about regarding value and the way we position the products, not just the technology? As a result of that, in 2004, I wound up going on my own and forming technical sales development. So that has been around now for 14 years. Technical sales development, by the way, is focused on helping sales teams increase revenue, margin, customer satisfaction, and all of that through training and consulting services. And when I say technical sales development, I don't just mean the pre-sale side of it. I mean any technical sale. So typically I get involved with helping companies across the board from software to IT, telecommunications, all of those different type of domains, mainly complex sales and things like that. And that's what I'm doing now, and loving it. And really, it's great because I can go back and with the experience that I had as a consumer of technology, where I was on the receiving end, to the sales and sales management, where I was selling, to the enablement piece of it. I really have a broad idea of all those roles, and I do just as much training for account managers as I do for sales engineers. So it's been something that's been my real passion, as to how do we work together better as a team.
All right. So many questions. Let's start with a simple one. You said you have your company name. What is the URL if people want to reach you?
It's technicalsalesdevelopment.com.
There aren't that many resources out there for SEs, so the more resources we provide, the better it is.
Absolutely.
You mentioned Lindy, like a construction company or something like that?
Lindy's a division of Union Carbide process plant design.
Okay.
Air separation. It's gone through a couple of different name changes. It was Praxair for a while, and I think now it's Linda, Linde, but it's pronounced Linda. So it was acquired and things like that. But it was, we did 3D modeling, and we did some pretty revolutionary things in the early 80s that really had not been heard of before. So that was an exciting time.
Did you have to be a mechanical engineer to get a sales engineering job selling the likes of AutoCAD or whatever software that mechanical engineers use?
Well, I wouldn't say you have to, but the thing is that the more practical experience you have with what your customers are going through, the better you could do your job. So, and this is where the challenge comes in terms of training people to be SEs right out of school. It's, the experience is a key part of it. So any technical experience you have in any engineering field, any computer field, anything that especially the things that your potential customers are going to do, that helps you with your credibility as far as having walked in their shoes and understanding the type of pain they're going through and the type of gains that they want to try to achieve.
Well, that's perfect because there's a lot of jobs for software engineers, computer engineers, that sort of thing, as in like sales engineering jobs. And I get a lot of questions from people that are mechanical engineers asking what kind of SE jobs out there. So I am not familiar with that, but I'm glad to have talked to you because now there are some options for those folks out there.
Well, and the other thing that I'll say about engineering in general, whether it's computer engineering, electrical, mechanical, because typically, engineers are more process oriented and more technically oriented to begin with, it winds up being a natural thing to go into something like a sales engineer job because it is about, at the end, accomplish something on their job, a technical thing. So having that same mindset is important. So I would say it's not necessarily which discipline of engineering that you're in that's so important, except for whatever the softwares you're selling. So obviously, if you're selling CAD software for electrical applications, yeah, it's best if you are an electrical engineer. But just the mindset around what the customer's going through and having walked in their shoes is certainly very beneficial.
Okay. Specifically for mechanical engineers, are there other kinds of mechanical sales engineers out there that are not involved in software sales?
Well, there are. There are SE type roles that are for mechanical systems. So even if it's not software, you have people who, sell pumps or hydraulic systems or machines, anything that involves anything mechanical would still be an opportunity for someone to take that background and go into a sales engineer position. So my focus happens to be more around technology and software and IT telecommunications, but absolutely there's sales engineers that work with manufacturing reps who go out and demonstrate equipment and things that are physical as well.
So you were a customer, and I know that was maybe 2 or 3 years back. If you recall, was there an SE that you enjoyed working with, and what made you enjoy working with that person?
Yes, there was, and I saw my fair share of them. The one person that sticks out, and I apologize, I won't remember their name. It might come to me, but and it sounds funny that I remember them, but not their name. But it was a long time ago, and many, many career changes since then. What I remember that they did was truly tried to understand what I was trying to do. It was a sales rep that also was doing sales part of it. So he did a phenomenal job. And I share this story in a lot of the trainings that I do. So I don't have really probably time to go into it now. But the long and the short of it is I had a challenge with the communication between two buildings when I was at Moore Research Center. And the manufacturing was down the road about 2.5 where the actual mainframe computer was, where also the engineering and R&D was being done. And there was a problem with the communications. It wasn't fast enough. So I got this idea of microwave between the two buildings. And I called Motorola, and a rep came out. And he didn't just start shoving a bunch of stuff in my face and saying, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? He went through all the things that I was trying to figure out and do, and then came up with an idea that would help what I really needed. The problem was I didn't have enough budget for it. It was too big for my budget. So what he then did is kept asking questions and found out that there was an equivalent issue with the voice communications between the two buildings. They were also having problems with the amount of data that could go between the two buildings. And he wound up talking with the voice team as well through my sponsorship because I was trying to get my problem solved. And as a result, we wound up getting that system put in. So I'll save the details for anybody that goes through the training. But the point is, his job of not just coming and trying to push a bunch of stuff. Instead, he asked the questions and found out what the situation was and wound up with a one of a kind. It was the first of its kind dual microwave system that had Ethernet and voice over it. And this was before the days of internet. So there was no public internet that we could plug into. We had our own internal LAN. And that microwave system enabled it, and we both got what we wanted, and he did a great job. So that sticks out in my mind.
Nice. So he did not give up, and he solved two problems with one solution, which
Absolutely.
enabled you to actually have the budget for it.
Absolutely. And, shameless plug here for John Kerr and the Mastering Technical Sales, because I'm one of the lead facilitators for one of the things we teach is something called the stoplight. So watch for the traffic lights. And he clearly had run into a red light with me where there was a no-go situation. But to your point, he did not give up. He kept asking questions that uncovered additional need and turned that red light into a green light. And it was, and his name was Marty. I will never forget his name. So that was a really good experience. But that's what he did exactly.
And that was a sales rep, and this it was a team thing.
Well, here's the thing. This is very unique, and you don't find this too often. It was the same guy. I don't really remember anybody else involved with it. I remember him doing all of it. So he took off his account manager hat for a while. He put on his SE hat, and he acted as an SE to ask the questions that were needed at a technical level. And in the back of his mind, he was still thinking about what is it that he's going to sell. But instead of the classic problem of trying to lead with a solution and hope to get a sale, he just did a great job of covering the whole gamut from the technical all the way to the strategic, and wound up solving our problem and wound up getting a really lucrative deal out of it for himself, because I know he leveraged that. We had a lot of people come to our site and visit because of that, first of its kind dual polarity microwave system.
So you're telling me the best sales team is one person who can do all the jobs? That's promising.
Well, here's the thing. I think that it goes to, and this is what my real passion is around, is SEs need to know what an account manager does and yet not necessarily have to do their role, and vice versa. And what I find is too much compartmentalization, where it's assumed that a SE is just going to do the technical, salesperson's just going to do the contract part. And I think that we're missing out on a huge opportunity for them to come together. So in a way, Marty wound up being a virtual team of SE and AM, but it was embodied in one person. What we want to do as sales teams is act the same way, where for the customer, it's really seamless. And yet at the same time, we're covering everything from the technical all the way through to the business aspect of it. And so real AMs and real SEs, and even in more complicated organizations where you have overlay SEs and you have product specialists and all that, everybody really needs to work together as a team so that it appears and it feels like one entity, one virtual person, if you will. And in some small organizations, yes, they can and should be doing it all. But in most large organizations, it's going to be separate people with separate roles. And unfortunately, oftentimes silos of focus.
So you have a little bit more experience than I do, like by a couple of years. What I've noticed is that the SE who's interested in what the sales guy does usually wants to end up moving into the salesperson role. And the SE who does not want to move into the salesperson role never pays attention to what the sales guy does and just does his own thing. Have you seen something different out there, or am I correct in my assumption?
So what I see is I see SEs that are wanting to get more information from their sales reps. And I do see, and recently run into a few cases where SEs were going to be moving into the sales. They have the ability to understand the business level aspects of it and do that additional discovery. So, but what I mainly see is, and for, we may have some account managers listening to this as well. And believe me, I am also an account manager because I sell sales training. So I'm talking about myself, and I work with a lot of account managers as well. But what we see is the SEs are wanting more from the account managers, and they don't seem to be getting it. We kind of have a running joke in some of our facilitator, not a joke, but a little bit of an insight in our facilitator circles of during our training with SEs, where we're talking about true consultative selling, when we're doing, anything to do with finding out business needs or qualification or any of that, we always are curious about when is it that the SEs is going to say, hey, my account manager needs this training, because seeing that they're asking these questions, why am I doing it? So to your point, there's like SEs feel like they need to be doing more of the sales role, And in some cases they do, and in some cases they actually move over. In other cases, they have a great relationship with their account manager and they get everything that they need. So this is why I'm focused on teaming and helping the SC and the AM work together better, because I believe there's a huge missed opportunity there for sales teams running more smoothly. So I'm not sure if I directly answered your question, but that's what I'm observing out there.
No, that's excellent. So, all right, let's get into this then. What do you think are the good qualities of an account manager when it comes to a technical sales process?
And even as I answer this, it's about working together. So from an account manager perspective, it's about owning the relationships at the higher levels within the organization. There's a little bit of a misnomer of always call at the top. Well, that doesn't always work because somebody like a CEO might be too high and they're not aware of what's really going on. And sometimes it's hard to be relevant to them. But clearly, an account manager should be owning higher level portions of an organization. And if we think about a typical organization that has some IT functions in it, which almost every organization does these days, it would be all the business units and even like the CIO, the CTO, those type of things, up to and potentially including the C-level. And they need to really own that relationship and understand what the business is trying to do. And then in a sort of decreasing dotted line fashion, as they move down, say into the organization, they will have relationships, but will have less direct knowledge of what goes down to very technical people like a network engineer or something like that. The account manager would know who they are, but they probably wouldn't really be able to communicate what the product does to that type of person. So it's about a relationship that is focused on business closure, because that's what the account managers do, is business closure. It's about getting the PO, it's getting the customer to sign off. So everything from the initial prospecting to generating the opportunity to qualifying the opportunity, and then all the way through working with the SE in the middle part of it, and with a healthy overlap toward each end, and then finally closing the deal out with terms and conditions and things, and then customer satisfaction after that. So the account manager's role shouldn't end at purchase order. It should end when the customer is, no longer in business or something, because it's about a continuing relationship of how they're using the product and what they're doing. So the account manager owns business closure at that higher level and establishing relationships and helping the SE come into that at the right times. And it could be very early on in terms of probably a little bit after qualification, but it could be qualification, definitely during discovery, because there's business discovery and technical discovery, and then all the way through to close in terms of proposal and things like that. So that summarizes, I think, the role of the account manager. And it's a lot more than, as SEs, we sometimes want to give them credit for. They might seem like they just set the meeting up and then turn it over to us, but we'll talk about that probably in a minute, is because that might be because of the way we are actually acting. They do a lot and they're important, and it's important for us to work together.
I agree with that in terms of they do a lot more than we actually see. But in terms of product knowledge, how much knowledge does the account manager need to know to sell the product?
It will vary by the product, of course, but the main thing they need to know is how is the product being used and what is it doing for the customer. They really shouldn't worry about or need to know speeds and feeds and all of that. Ironically enough, that's the easiest thing to know. And sometimes that's what people latch onto. And so sometimes I find that account managers, and again, I'll point back to the organization. So this is really a cultural thing within different companies, but oftentimes the organization, because they're selling a product, they focus on the product and the product features and the capabilities. And they feel like differentiation comes by showing what the product can do as opposed to what the customer is trying to do with the product. So it's all about knowing enough about the product is in the realm of possibility. So they've got to understand the way it functions. They got to know what the parameters are, what it's intended for. But what they should be doing is looking at ways that the customer is going to use it, and therefore ask questions around, what are you trying to do? And tell me about your environment, in terms of the business environment and the business goals. what do you do for your customers? And in the back of their mind, they will be thinking about, okay, this is where my product fits. This is where my product doesn't fit. This is where I might have some competitive challenges, so I need to differentiate. But all the time thinking about the use of the product and the way that the customer's ultimately going to benefit from it. That should be their main focus.
And in terms of interaction with the SE, when you think about a good sales guy SE team, how do you see the interactions between them?
So the way that a solid SE AM team works is the account manager at the appropriate time, and none of this is really hard and fast rules. So it's like there's an art to, how you know when to do enough of each of the things I'm going to talk about, and that comes with experience. But a good account manager brings an SE in early enough that the whole spectrum can be covered. So remember, we started talking about the account manager working at the higher level and sort of having a diminishing dotted line down to the lowest level. And by low, I just mean in the organization, not in terms of function, but, just like a network engineer. Well, guess what? An SE's role is just the opposite of that. So the SE owns the people that are very technical up to and including the middle part. And this is where they overlap. So what does a great AM SE team look like? They are working in concert with the account manager from the top down and the SE from the bottom up. And they're not doing it independently. They're doing it in a way that they're analyzing the opportunity, who's involved, where the way that they're influencing each other. And so right from early qualification, as soon as the deal is qualified, the discovery part of it should be a parallel effort with the account manager working to find out the business needs and certainly taking, some solution SEs or solution type architects on those discovery calls so that they can understand the fit, and then bringing in the more technical SEs like a pre-sales engineer with that story in mind so that they can continue understanding the technical qualification. So they work in parallel: business qualification leading to business close, technical qualification leading to technical close. The two are intertwined, and the best account managers I've ever worked with understood that. And they never stopped allowing me to get information that I would need. In other words, they didn't keep me in a box and then get me out when it was time to do a demo. I had a relationship with the customer as well. Now, caveat or timeout for a second here, that can't be done all the time, just because of resources. A lot of SEs are supporting 3 or 4 account managers, and depending on if you're a commercial SE or an enterprise SE or an inside SE or a partner SE, there's different levels of reasonable involvement. But what I encourage is, and I think is a miss on the part of the account managers, is I think they're afraid to get the SEs involved too early because they're afraid of what they're going to say. But I find in all of the training that I've done for hundreds, if not thousands, of course, thousands of SEs, is that SEs don't want to just be showing up at a demo and throwing up a bunch of features and functions. Yet that's what they're often set up for based on a bad relationship. If they've been involved and they work together as a team, now they'll know more about the environment. So as a SE, we would know why we're doing this and what is the customer trying to achieve, and who are the people in the audience, by the way, who are the people we're talking with, and what role do they have in the decision process? And are they a key person, or are they a tire kicker, who is just going to waste our time? So it's that teamwork aspect, Ramsey, and it's about engagement and being willing to work together.
I noticed throughout this conversation that all the qualities that you're talking about are related when it comes to like interacting with the customer, except for that last point where you mentioned that AMs could be afraid of what SEs are going to say. I feel there's a lot more like interpersonal relationship that takes place between the SE and account manager outside of the meeting the customer, which you just touched on last.
Yes.
So what are some of the good qualities in the interaction outside of the customer site?
Well, if you're, it's like any team, right? So if you're on the team together, you're going to be looking for common interests and potentially doing things together, having a camaraderie, that a level of trust that goes beyond on just the customer environment. And that's where some of the early things that I wound up doing with some of my teams was, even team building type exercises. So we didn't look at each other as separate roles necessarily. It was about how do we work together and what are the ways that we can leverage each other's strengths, even if when it comes to just the way that we interact with each other or things that we know about or common interests that we have. So I encourage that. It's depending on your physical situation in terms of where you're working, obviously being remote or having more of a virtual type of team is more difficult. So when I had a virtual team, we tried to do more around spending some time, like just whatever it would be, catching up on what people were doing. And as a manager, I tried to have a little bit more direct contact with some of the people that were remote so that they could feel part of the team and things like that. So those are all aspects I would say outside of the customer environment.
So when you say remote, are you saying that they're looking like at home, working behind their desk from home, or are they like
yes,
in the field, customer sites remotely?
Mostly it's people working from home, but in certain situations, they could be at a customer site because they're dedicated to a customer site with very large accounts. We had some SEs that were on site, basically 100% there, dedicated. And what they were looking for was, and what they were doing was helping current opportunities and then working with the customer strategically for additional things that they were trying to accomplish. But mainly when I say remote, I'm talking about geographically dispersed teams, anybody that's not co-located, that it just takes that extra effort to keep people engaged and understand, connected with each other. So any sales managers that are listening, that's something I would highly recommend is if you have a geographically dispersed team, plan some time to get them together from time to time is always great, but at a minimum, reach out individually and also have some group type chats and, video conferences or whatever so that everybody can stay in touch and feel connected.
From my perspective, I've always been lucky that I've only had one account manager that I had to work with. And I was able to build that relationship with them. Obviously, they were good people who also took the effort to build a relationship with me. I assume it'll be different if I was covering 2 or 3 or 4 account managers. How can one SE be able to build a relationship with 4 account managers with conflicting requirements and everything is hot and they need everything right now?
Well, there's a bunch of different parts to that. So one would be at a personal level. It probably is more in the context of when you're preparing for or talking with them about a particular deal. So because you can't spend dedicated time with all of them, make sure that there's a personal connection there. It's not all about business. When it comes to balancing the workload and figuring out who to help, that's where your manager oftentimes needs to come into play. Is if you're way stretched too thin, or you seem to be, one person is demanding more of your time and it's taking away time from others that you feel like you should be helping out, work with your manager, your direct manager, to do that. But this is again where the more working together as a team with the customer as the focus, the more you're going to bond together as well. I think sometimes we see worst case scenario each other as somewhat of adversaries or at least not on the same page. What we could do is use that experience for us to get on the same page. So we're both working together to solve the customer's problem instead of just having stuff thrown over the wall to us and hey, go do a demo for this customer. And instead it's more of working together to figure out what's going on and then what is the objective of the meeting and all that. You'll get a bond and you'll get to know them better. The other aspect of this, I think anybody that's been around sales engineering for a while knows, is unfortunately account managers come and go a lot more frequently than SEs do. So we are going to eventually get to know a lot more people over time, and some of those relationships are going to be short-lived. Whereas with the customer, we have a longer relationship and they know us better and things like that. So this is where, again, I think that there's an opportunity for the account manager to utilize a grounding source and, a continuity, if you will, to the relationship. So whatever you can, when you're working with the account manager, the more you can help them understand what's going on in the environment, the more you're going to get along with each other as well, because that helps them.
If I understand the gist of this entire conversation correctly, and I believe I do, but correct me if I'm wrong, it is very important for an account manager and SE to work as a team, not just to like pass the ball to each other and say, now it's your turn to do your thing and now it's my turn, but work together to build a relationship with the customer in different areas, to work on the demos together. Like obviously the SE would take the lead on the demo, but like we'll take information from the account manager, and also the account manager would take into account what the SE's opinion is in the account planning. Does it sound somewhat correct?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical. And unfortunately, the way that a lot of sales organizations and sales enablement and even transitions are set up, it creates this separation. There's many companies that train account managers. There's many companies like, my affiliation with John Kerr, and also I'm a Great Demo certified affiliate. So I work with Peter Cohan and I do Great Demo. A lot of that, oftentimes that's more focused on SEs, in terms of the way sales training is. What's missing, I feel like, is bringing that together. And I'm not suggesting that there's some kind of magical training that needs to happen that's different than any of those. I think all of those pieces are important. And certainly John has some salespeople in his class, and definitely a Great Demo. I've had many workshops where in one case, it was an entire team that included the AMs and the SEs, which is wonderful. What I'm talking about is a mindset and an approach around SEs and AMs working together better, even with their respective training, but understanding the sales process. I'm working on some things around what does the sales process look like, because I don't think AMs understand enough about what the potential is to leverage SEs, and I don't think SEs understand enough about what it is that AMs need to go through. Again, AMs being focused on business close, SEs focused on technical close. Those aren't two different separate things. And even saying those two things, they don't get their fair share of focus. For example, with the SE, technical close is often just looked at as a technical win, where you come out of a demo and you're high-fiving each other and saying, that was a great demo, and then nothing happens. On the account manager side, they go in and they try and get some relationships with the customer, and they feel like they're doing great things, but nothing happens. So how do we work together to understand the lay of the land and connect the business down to the technical and back up again? So it's not just, and it's everything. It's from the way we ask the questions, to the way that we work with each other, to the way that we portray the value back to the customer, where the SE's covering more of the technical, AM's covering more of the business, and both of those need to be interwoven with each other. And so joint discovery, planning out meetings so that we know what the outcomes of the meetings are going to be, working together so that we understand what's involved with business close and how technical close is going to fit into it, helping the account manager with things that we see that aren't quite right. So anywhere that there's any deal's not going to happen. Sometimes SEs are afraid to bring that up because it's going to sound like we're saying no. But as an account manager, I look to my SE in order to find out where the risks are. And by the way, one secret that I think any of you that have been around the sales engineering function for a while, SEs are kind of like the bartender for the customer. What I mean by that is the customer will typically tell them just about anything, and they won't want to tell the account manager anything, which gives a tremendous opportunity for discovery by the SE that the account manager can leverage. And yet it seems like all too often the SE is just the demo person or just the technical proof person. And it resorts down to some technical aspect, which usually means it's for technical people. And the last time I looked, technical people are probably not the ones that are cutting the check to get the deal done. So we have to have technical people understanding what the solution is so that they can sign off on technical closure. But we need the business aspect in order to get the budget and get the thing approved and actually get it signed off. So it is a very much of a interaction that I don't see happening. And unfortunately, sales training and things tend to separate that out, where there's AM only training, SE only training, and the middle ground is not really being explored, which is what my passion is right now.
Speaking of SEs being kind of like bartenders, it is true, but at some point, I think if someone doesn't tell that to an SE, there is a big chance that the SE will not recognize that. I had a account manager the other day complain to me how their SEs don't just visit their customers for coffee, or unless they're on site to answer some technical questions scheduled by an account manager or to do a demo, they don't visit a customer, which in the end, if you're always there with the account manager, you're not going to be seen any different than an account manager, in my opinion.
Right. Well, and even if you are, though, the way you work together. So you asked me earlier, what were some of the attributes of great account managers? A great account manager that I remember was somebody who set up the call, went with me to the call, and knew what questions to ask and knew what questions to allow me to ask, and wasn't afraid of a good, deep discussion. I think all too often SEs are seen as somebody who's going to say the wrong thing or is going to be too technical. Yet, ironically enough, a lot of account managers use SEs that way, very technical. So, one of the things that I always say in the SE training that I do is, let's turn the mirror on ourselves for a minute and see, are we acting in a way that maybe is why we're being treated that way? What can we do as SEs to show our value, and even do a little bit of internal selling to help the account manager realize that if we can get more involved with doing discovery and talking with people who are willing to talk with us, that can benefit the account manager. And then they can set the call up. And even if we do go together, it's the way we're engaged with the customer. So I don't see anything wrong with both people being present at the same time. But to your point, the AM should invite and facilitate the ability for the SE to go in on their own. We used to do something we called process audits, where it was basically discovery to find out what the customer's doing. And we'd go in there just as a SE team, or even me by myself as a SE. And I would go in and I'd talk to all kinds of different people. I'd follow along their process, where does this information go and who's using that? And we're talking everybody from operations to sales to manufacturing, and getting a feel for the whole process. And they see you walking around. In fact, one of the customers, I was badged. I had a badge. I had free reign inside their entire organization. And I was a SE for the company that they were buying solutions from. But I was a badged person, had full access, and they saw me as somebody who was their advocate. And when we had our discussions, they knew we were looking for their best interest in mind. So I think it can work both ways, where facilitating meetings that are done properly together as a team, as well as separately. And by the way, the account manager, of course, at the same time is working the higher levels. So they should be having the discussions with the finance people to find out how this is going to be funded, and even procurement to find out what the purchasing process is, and the key stakeholders who are the ones that are going to benefit the most from it in terms of this unit. But then comparing notes and getting together outside of that customer environment to lay out the plan and figure out what to do. Of course, the more complicated the deal, the more of this that goes on. Commercial type things, inside sales, that's a little bit principles can apply in terms of trying to find out what the customer is really trying to do and share that information with each other. So let's try as SEs to be more facilitative, more consultative, and take that information and share it with the account manager, show that we can have the conversations that add value. And then account managers, let's utilize SEs in a way that's adding value to the process, and not just throw the stuff and say, go do a demo, because that just perpetuates this thing about SEs are more technical and the AMs being afraid of what it is we're going to say.
That was exactly the point that I was trying to make. You just made it a lot better than I did. So thank you for that, for elaborating for the team.
Yeah, we're on the same page there. Yeah. Absolutely.
So this is a good spot to transition. Bottom line is, work together as a team. Know that you have the same goal that you want to achieve, and stop working against each other.
Yes, even if it's unintentional, because I don't think it's on purpose. I think there's a lack of understanding of each other's roles and even of what each other is taught. One of the things that I advocate is, whenever there is some SE training going on, the executive should be aware of what that training is, because now your SEs are equipped for even more benefits. But oftentimes on Monday, the SEs are forced back into their normal behavior or the previous behavior, because the sales team wasn't aware of what the SEs were taught. So cross-pollination is really important. And that goes to the manager level. So SEMs working with their sales counterparts and vice versa, so that they understand the way that they work together better as a team.
That is perfect. And now we're going to transition to the not so fire round. These are 4 questions, which I ask most of my guests. And because it's not so fire round, you can take your time answering them.
Okay.
What is the one thing that you loved about being a sales engineer?
I loved the problem-solving aspect of it. Looking at the customer's situation, understanding what they're going through, and then figuring out the way that I can best help them. And I think that's where I really relied on, and I'm so thankful for my engineering background, because it allowed me to apply process to that whole discovery. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? And then where can I help them out? And that's a really good feeling of not just selling something, but knowing that you've helped somebody with what they're trying to do and they really appreciate it, instead of being reluctant to sign off on it as a sort of a necessary evil. Rather, they were excited and they wanted it. And, we felt a sense of mutual accomplishment.
Next question. If there's one thing you would have changed about your job as a sales engineer, what would it be?
Just thinking this out loud for a second, maybe I'm thinking my situation was unique, but maybe it wasn't that unique, because it definitely was an evolution. So I was able to fall into, and sort of like the path just was created before me and I followed it in terms of where I went. I would say along those lines, just being more tuned in with business needs and things like that earlier. But again, I was already kind of tuned into that as a customer. I think continual learning, not assuming that you know it all, listening to things like your tremendous resources here for the podcasts or other blogs and things that other people have. The continuous learning aspect of it, I think, is really important. And it's often too easy to say you don't have time for that. But putting aside some additional time for explicit continuous learning, I would say, is one area that I would do differently.
That's a common trait between a lot of SEs that I've worked with.
Yep.
Where like, hey, let's do a bi-weekly call within my company. Let's do a bi-weekly call just so we can all learn from each other, because we're all remote. And no, we're too busy. Like, even on a Friday evening, like after like at 4, nobody wants to see you at 4 on a Friday. Everybody wants to
Right.
go home. It's like, no, I can't. We're too busy.
I was going to just say, I would encourage those to be, sometimes they are, and it's necessary. Sometimes they are tips and techniques or things about the product. And so that's always valuable as well. But I would challenge everybody to do things like share some of your experiences in terms of when things went well, even talk about with, what are some ways that you could work with your account manager better? What were some of your customer successes and things like that, and celebrate some of those successes together. Or pick a topic and have somebody talk about something that's not technical oriented, but more relationship oriented or more toward consultative selling, those types of things as well.
Question number 3. Is there a book or resource that every SE should read?
Well, there's tons of them out there. One that might be a little bit off the beaten path that I've stumbled on recently was called 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote to Chaos. Yeah, and so it's really is about the way that you are being ethical about what you're doing, being true to what you're doing, being honest and humble about what you're doing, looking at the other person who's more important than you. I mean, it goes back to a lot of very basic principles, but it's a great reminder of the way our relationship should be within our sales team and with our customer, so that we can just make sure that we're always seen as somebody who, I don't want to be seen as somebody who's trying to sell. I want to be what I am and what I strive to be as somebody that's helping. And yes, I'm selling something, of course, but I would rather have it the other person sees it as more of what they want instead of what I'm trying to push on them. And so turning it from a sale into a pull, a buy, right? Instead of a push, making it a pull, turn it from a sale into a buy. And then everybody wins. And I think that you wind up with better relationships. And I just found that these principles are some of the core behind the way that I've tried to be. And it was a good reminder for how we should strive to be.
So I've heard of this book. I haven't read it. And it didn't even occur to me that it could be related to sales engineering or sales in general. But it's amazing how
absolutely.
so many books that have nothing to do with anything related to sales can be translated into sales.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, for example, rule number 8 is tell the truth or at least don't lie. So that's where the account manager is afraid that we're going to tell the truth that something's not working. Well, there's a way to do it that's ethical and yet not step in it.
Yeah.
So that's what a lot of this is about.
Last question. What advice would you give a sales engineer that you feel they don't get from anyone else?
We often think about what we're trying to do with the customer, but one of your very important customers is your account manager. And I think that putting more time into building that relationship and understanding what each other is doing and looking at it as a team that's helping the customer instead of different groups that are in some cases at a minimum misunderstanding each other, but in some cases adversarial. That I don't find that too often, but it can get to that point. So look at your account manager as a customer as well. And the same things that you would think about for a customer in terms of provide you and all of that, and even selling to them, I would say applies to your account manager. So if they're not treating you the way you want to be treated, I would turn the mirror on myself and say, what am I doing? What could I do differently? If I feel like there's an opportunity for getting things to be better, what can I do to position the value for them just the way I would position the value to a customer? What are the ways that I act around them and the type of questions that I ask? There's an old sales adage that says you're down to the level at which you talk or ask. And the point being, if you ask technical questions, you're going to be delegated down to the bottom of the pyramid. Same thing with the account manager. If we only respond in terms of technical demos and things, well, that's what they're going to think that we can provide. But to help them understand better about what the potential is, that's what I would say is advice that you may not hear from anybody else.
Have you read the book called Extreme Ownership?
Not familiar with that.
Okay. So I've mentioned this book several times on the podcast, so probably listeners are getting bored from me saying it. But it talks a lot about what you just said. Taking ownership of whatever's happening to you. It's not happening to you, it's happening. Like, you can do something about it. If you don't like the way you're being treated, see what you can do to change the way people treat you without having to punch them in the face, that is.
Yeah, right. Do it in a way that's actually constructive. I'm a big win-win guy. I don't like to win at the other people's expense, and I don't believe in other people winning at other people's expense, because eventually it's going to be a lose-lose. I think that's the core of a lot of what you're talking about.
Yep. And that's pretty much what the book is about. It's about, if you're in a bad situation, help yourself, and by helping yourself, you'll help the person who's putting you in the bad situation, and then he'll be happy or she will be happy.
Yep.
And I'm kind of simplifying it, but if you really, I would suggest you listen to the audiobook. It's written by a couple of Navy SEALs and then read by them.
Yeah.
So you just feel like you can move a mountain after that.
There you go. Oh, Thank you.
No, it's my pleasure. So that brings us to the end of the show. Thanks a lot, Art. I really enjoyed chatting with you. This was fun.
My pleasure. And certainly if anybody wants to connect on LinkedIn, feel free to do that, and watch for more to come around the idea of having a more seamless sales experience and working together better as a team.
Your LinkedIn is going to be on the show notes, as well as your website is going to be there on the show notes. Do you have a Twitter by any chance? I believe you do.
Yes.
That will be on the show notes as well.
Yep.
I already follow you on Twitter, so I should be able to find it. But what is it for people listening? Maybe it's easier for them like that.
It's Tech Sales Dev, at Tech Sales, TECH Sales Dev.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Art, and I will talk to you soon then.
Thank you, Ramzi. I appreciate the opportunity, and everybody for listening. Really appreciate the time, and wish you all the best and building those relationships.
Thanks, Art. And thank you guys for listening. Some of my greatest frustrations in the past have been due to my account managers. Whether we are not on the same page or me thinking I can do their job better, which is a thought that every sales engineer has. But also some of my greatest success has come because on a specific deal, my account manager and I were in sync. And I'm not just saying one deal, I'm just saying multiple deals, but we were in sync. We were understanding each other during the meetings with the customers. We were understanding what each of us needs to help push the deal forward and then going and doing it. thinking back on that, I understand why Art is so interested about the dynamics of the account manager SE relationship and how much it can affect not only the sale positively or negatively, but it can also affect how much fun account managers and SEs have in their roles. Bad SE will make life miserable for an account manager, and a bad account manager will make life miserable for an SE. So show notes for this episode are at wetheSalesEngineers.com/show47. Don't forget the giveaway. If you think time with me is actually helpful to you, try to win one of those 5 slots. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to it. And with that, this is Ramzi signing off.